Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for what's hard to believe our Q1 of 2023 M-Files user group webinar. Really appreciate everybody's attendance today. I know timing might not be perfect with the end of the month and end of quarter. However, we do appreciate you taking some time to meet with us today. With me on the webinar, I will have Tracy Coleman, who most of you probably know, as well as Dave Anderson, who a lot of you know as well. And we're looking forward to presenting some good content to you today. Few housekeeping items before we get started. As always in these webinars, we are going to be recording them. So at the end, you'll be getting the link to the recording, which will be out on our website that you can share with other colleagues that you feel would benefit from the information. We do encourage questions. However, with the amount of people we have in these webinars, all the attendees are in listen only mode. So please chat us any questions you have in the chat box inside of the WebEx application. And we will be answering the questions throughout the webinar and then have a little bit of time at the end as well for a Q&A. We will be drawing for a $25 Amazon gift card at the end of the session today. So good luck to all of you on that as well. And with that, Tracy, I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thanks, Kurt, and thanks everybody for joining us. I don't know if it feels like March or December, but I suppose depending where you are, especially in Minnesota, you might feel like July. So nonetheless, kind of odd, but we are in March and have a lot of good content around M-Files and maintenance, troubleshooting, and just overall guidance as you are looking to ensure that the system stays in tune and operating to its fullest potential. So today's agenda, like I said, is going to focus first on the M-Files maintenance. We're going to talk around things regarding reoccurring maintenance tasks, database options that you have, managing users and what that looks like, vault structure and where that management should take place along with backups, upgrading M-Files as it pertains to subscriptions, and then basic troubleshooting tasks. I'm also going to tap into file data encryption. Some of you on the call may have been our designated individuals to receive some communication over the last month regarding options that you have to encrypt your data. So I'm going to cover that in case there are some questions around it. And then I'm going to leave you with a whole wide variety of different technical resources available to you, to your end users, to your IT administrators, that will really keep you in tune to not only the solution, what's up and coming, but also as new staff comes on board, really engaging them into the solution with a lot of our e-learning content, which is completely free to use. So with that, let me get started with talking about a little bit of the reoccurring maintenance. So part of the technical resources that will be provided to you is a link to the M-Files knowledge base. It's through that knowledge base, M-Files has published their recommended maintenance. And in that guide, you will see the image that is actually displayed on the screen. But I wanted to spend some time today to really hone in on the importance of ensuring the daily checks, the monthly checks, quarterly tasks, and in some cases biannual tasks are really carried forward. That in us as your partner can assist with a lot of the things that we're going to talk about. I understand you guys are all busy and this may not be necessarily your first go-to, and that's why we are here as a resource to you. But daily checks, just like any other application that you're running, it's probably not uncommon for IT administrators or those in the IT role are going to be accessing Windows event logs to really ensure that systems are not providing any type of erroring. M-Files specifically, you might see things regarding file collection, or if you're doing any specific zonal OCR capture, it might provide some insight in why certain things did not come on in. Object refreshes. There's a lot of, it's really that front windshield of indicators that we want to take a look at things deeper into the system. So if they're not daily checks, at least weekly, to make sure that, again, you're not seeing errors overall on the servers, but more importantly, errors pertinent to M files and or SQL if that is where the database is at. Monthly checks. So as a lot of you have been using M files for years, we want to make sure that your resources are scaled to grow as the solution has grown. So making sure that items such as your memory allocation or your hard drive space, just the overall consumption of the servers, both the application server, and if you have an environment where there is a SQL server as well, making sure that those are remaining in check. We're going to see fluctuations throughout the day. That is normal with just general use. But we want to make sure that you're not consistently pegged. This also is true really from a client standpoint. So if you're getting reports from users that, they're experiencing slowdowns, you really want to start at the endpoint and work your way through. And so I would say the same is true as far as just a basic troubleshooting, not only verifying those resources on the server, but that we're going one step further if the report is from a workstation or a user that's having some latency, that we even use those same type of strategies on the desktop. mFiles is also recommending, if you are an organization that uses replication, that you review any conflicts or messages that are pertinent to replication, and that those do get resolved. Quarterly tasks, I'm going to go a little bit further into optimization, where you find optimization and what it does, but there's an automated task that is happening out of the box weekly. Typically, it is set for Saturday evenings. The thorough optimization that is scheduled out of the box actually takes that vault offline while it's conducting its work. The manual optimization is another task that actually allows us to destroy items that no longer are referenced, especially as it pertains to a SQL database. So there are some advantages of running a manual optimization over a thorough because of those reasons. As we move down into the last item noted here, biannual and annual tasks, running verify repair, rebuilding search indexes. If event logs are pertinent in your organization where you might have to archive those off, compliance industries may run into that scenario. There are modules within mFiles through the electronic signature module that actually allows us to export those and even export those on a schedule. We'll talk a little bit about what's in those event logs. There's a wealth of information. Again, not always relevant to every organization, but knowing that the option is out there. And then just overall cleaning the vault. So cleaning referring to, do you have good retention policies in place? Look at how your age of data really has to be set up through the organization. Accounting, that's always a good example that we like to use. 7 years typically for a lot of the documentation that is required for auditing. After 7 years, what's happening to that data? So making sure that you have good retention policies, you have users who also are reviewing destroyed items that may have not been deleted because users don't typically have the rights to be able to destroy. Going through those and cleansing that vault, making sure that really the data in there is relevant, is organized in a good fashion, and making sure there's no red flags anywhere throughout that there's any issues. Let's go a little bit further into the maintenance tasks, and I did make mention of these. You're going to hear a couple of things very consistently throughout the presentation today because it is of importance. So as you're looking at verifying resource usage, for those that are, again, playing in this area, understanding, again, you're going to have spikes and areas where it's going to reduce as far as consumption just based off of general day-to-day use. But you're going to want to make sure that with growth, you have enough disk space, you have enough memory, it's scaled well. In an environment where we're starting to see a transition from on-premise equipment to Azure and or another cloud service, making sure that can grow with you, and keeping your eyes very focused on performance overall so the solution can continue to run as well as it should. The disk space is a big one. Unfortunately, I've had the opportunity to work with customers where they've unfortunately ran out of space. And that is never necessarily the best situation because it actually can cause corruption within the database. It can cause issues with your search indexes. So the more you can escape the situation where users can no longer contribute documents or data to the system because there's literally no space there for them to do that. You want to make sure that your thresholds and your monitoring systems really allow you to stay ahead of any type of storage space limitations. Making sure your backups are running, and we'll get into that as well on another slide. SQL, for those running a SQL database versus the native Firebird database. There is an opportunity to set a cap on the instance running the database. So we highly recommend that you set a cap that is below what the environment really allows for, because SQL will eat up every little bit of that memory, therefore slowing down all the other processes. So setting that threshold below what really the machine is allocated will allow that database to continue to run a little bit more efficiently. Your backup process, take a look at those processes to make sure that the schedules really don't overlap to as much as you can prevent, especially from an optimization standpoint. I had mentioned that there is a weekly scheduled optimization. I'll show you where that's located today, but you want to make sure that the backup process for mFiles is worked away from that same time. And like I mentioned, those that are using replication, ensuring that you at least acknowledge where those conflicts are. mFiles will bring awareness of where those conflicts are, and then making sure that you can get those resolved. Getting a little bit deeper into those biannual tasks and annual maintenance that mFiles called out. So running, verify, and repair. I'm going to go back to the scenario where the server runs out of space. Unfortunately, that is a time that we find ourselves not only for a task base, but for that particular situation to need to run a verify and repair on that database. A lot of times there's two options. There's a quick and a thorough. A lot of times the quick will go ahead and resolve what issues are present, and users can remain in the system as that quick verify and repair takes place. Depending on how large your database is, this could be a task that takes minutes. This could be a task that takes over 24 hours. It really depends on the complexity and the volume of that vault. Also, how frequently it's been run. If you are one that is coming out to do your maintenance tasks as recommended, it's going to run more efficiently than if you haven't run it for 8 years. If it errs, mFiles will give us an opportunity through its tool to be able to repair. A lot of times, most times, that has been successful. If not, we have the option to run a thorough. The thorough verify and repair will take that vault offline. So users will need to, we need a maintenance break to be able to do that. Rebuilding search indexes. Again, coming back on the example of what if my server runs out of space? This is a great candidate to say users might come back to us to say, we're having trouble finding things. Not that it spins, but I plug in a value, maybe an invoice number, and nothing is returned, but yet I know that invoice is in the system. That could be an indicator to you that the search indexes have to be rebuilt. That a lot of times, again, not only because the server runs out of space, as that vault grows, it is a good maintenance task as being called out by mFiles. Now, the caveat of rebuilding those search index is that you have to, users, the quick search, the quick search is going to be impacted. So users can do advanced search, or if they have views, they can use those views. But as far as doing a general search, until that search index rebuilds, those general searches are going to be pretty sporadic. As far as how long does it take to run a rebuild, again, the answer is it depends on your resource capacity, how large that vault is. There's various scenarios that kind of factor into the length conversation. Rebuilding those search indexes, however, there is through the documentation really good advice as far as being able to leverage a backup of the existing indexes to be able to use those until the newest ones are rebuilt. Also, there are options for other types of search utilities. We talked about those in previous webinars, and I won't get into the depths of them here today, but there are some times that people are running more than one type of a search tool. DT search, as referred to, is the out-of-the-box search engine that I'm referring to here. Cleaning up the vaults. Some of you may have been on our last webinar where we talked about our application vault framework, our application module library that we were excited to introduce here at the end of 2022. In there, if you haven't addressed replication, there is a tool, an app in that library that will help onboard potential replication, or not replication, but retention policies for your organization. So that is why it's called out here as being optional. It really lends to using then content replication and archiving processes to get that data that is not needed any longer. Might need to go to another vault, could go off into just being destroyed completely, might go off into another network storage for long-term storage. The option really is yours. But the mixture of the two really blend nice to be able to get you to the finish line with cleaning up those vaults. Archiving your mFiles event logs. Again, if you are looking to have unlimited event logs, the electronic signature module will allow you to do that. There is out of the box the ability to expand the capacity of the event log, although it's not the best and or totally recommended, I would say, from mFiles. You have to be cognizant of how many records you really want to save. There's a lot of options in there to be able to disable things that by default are enabled. And also, again, the capacity. I think the default capacity is 10,000 records in this event log. All right, moving forward into database. So this may be unfamiliar or familiar to those on the call here today, but really there's two different types of database structures or engines for mFiles. The out-of-box engine is referred to as Firebird. It's a good database to onboard if we know we're connecting into a lot of core systems to do objects thinking, maybe with customers, vendors, employees. We're probably not going to bring you on into a Firebird database. That is more positioned for SQL, especially just with better volume. But there are some of you that might be in Firebird. We do have the capability of increasing Firebird, but it does cap out fairly small at 2 gig. mFiles does a really good job, or has a really good tool to be able to transition from Firebird to SQL. It's actually a tool within their admin utility, and considerations of really, is their slowness? Have you seen a lot of growth? Are you proceeding to exceed or come right up against the maximum recommended size? Numbers of users really play into that. So again, know that it is a great quick out of the box. We use it a lot for our sandboxing environments because it's pretty portable, but it's not, it's definitely not the bigger of the two database engines. And so as you are recognizing growth, there's more users, and you're just looking for something a little bit more enterprise level, that's usually where we go to SQL. I would say, just in rough guess, we probably have 70-30 out with our customers that we serve. Again, that's just going off just to give you an idea. But with SQL, as we go into that database structure, again, mentioned here, it's really good on that instance. If it's not let me back up. If it's not a dedicated SQL VM for M files, we for sure want to make sure, in any case, we try to do a dedicated instance. On that instance, then not only can you protect and do things along the permission end, but you also have the ability to provision certain resources to that specific instance. So making sure that you're setting that cap below what is available for that environment is a good general practice. The other step that we typically do is make sure that the file data of the database really sits outside of SQL. SQL is a great database engine. So when you talk about metadata, you talk about being able to search that metadata, it is a fabulous tool there. It doesn't do so well once you start placing documents within that database. It gets really hard to manage. Your backups get extremely large. Your backups take a long time to run. And so that is why separation of the database, aka metadata, versus the file data is how we structure our deployments. Important to note, it's extremely critical if you are extracting that file data and it is located wherever, most commonly on the mFiles app server, that you are backing up that file data. That is called out in any of the documentation as we are deploying. We have our key stakeholders in that project. They will be receiving instructions on where we place things, what is recommended, along with the mFiles recommendations pertaining to backups and beyond. One note, SQL Express typically is not recommended at all. Actually, Firebird and putting it side by side performs a lot better. And so the two options really on the table is you can go with the out-of-box Firebird. Once you've exceeded the growth or the max on that database, we have a really good, easy pathway into SQL. I'm going to pause there and see if there's any initial questions before we proceed.
No questions have come in, Tracy, but we have had a number of attendees join us after we kicked things off. So just a reminder, if you have any questions at all, please enter those into the chat box inside of the WebEx application, and we'll be sure to answer those throughout the webinar.
Perfect. We're going to jump into managing users. We're not going to go necessarily into the details of how to manage users. Again, at the end, we're going to provide you the links to our e-learning. Our solutions trainer, Dave Anderson, has done a great job to really put pertinent information out there, quick tips to be able to walk you through steps like managing users. So there are a handful of videos out there pertaining to this. But as far as, high level, making sure that your login accounts, your licensing is accurate, your login accounts, if they're no longer there, making sure you're following general practices to disable and/or, in some cases with login accounts, removing users, which are users of the vault. Those have to remain. They can be disabled. They don't need a license. They have a correlating ID record within the database. So any of the touch points the user has made throughout their course of using mFiles is tied to that. That is why we instruct, we guide, we train on users really need to be once in a vault, always in a vault. They just don't need to be active. They also don't have to be part of a user group. So a lot of you are leveraging AD synchronization, users of an accounting group. By virtue of being a member in Active Directory to that group, It's going to sync down into M files, place that same user in the Active Directory group for accounting, and now that user is ready to go with any of the data or components that they have access to or should have access to in M files. So there's a lot of just overall maintenance that you can facilitate through the lens of Active Directory and not have to duplicate your work through M files. Also, as you are looking at setting up permissions for the content in your vault, using good practices there, using named access control lists, not doing class-based permissions per se, but leveraging those named access lists with your AD groups or mFiles user groups really allows the system to absorb those changes as people come and go a lot easier than if you are naming people specifically on classes. That is going to be pretty intense, although a background task. That's pretty intense as changes are made. System administrators, know who your system administrators are of M files. There's different levels, vault system administrators or full system administrators, they have different permissions. And then if you're using user sync is a component of the compliance kit that is free. But what it ultimately does is as these users are created in the vault, it creates a corresponding user, aka employee, inside of the vault to then probably be engaged with workflow tasks. So just making sure that overall managing users is something that is visible and is a task for somebody on staff to be able to make sure that the people who need access to the system are, and you're just continuing to flush through all the other cleanup that should take place. Moving into vault structure management. So mFiles has the mFiles admin tool. Some of you may be familiar with what that is. First recommend is to run that administration tool from the server. There are some tasks that are involved within that tool that do not run well from the workstation level. We also have had scenarios where they might be out of sync. So the best guarantee that you have is that everybody who is managing mFiles at any level, and if they need admin, that they're remote desktoping to the server to conduct that work. Always important to close out of the administrator. mFiles with its monthly updates, that becomes even more important to ensure that nothing locks that process from happening. You also want to make sure that your clients and your server are running the same version. We've had some changes with mFiles. Subscription came out a handful of years back. People are starting to get used to the automatic updates that are coming out monthly. But with that said, we want to make sure that all users that should be getting those updates are. There are certain versions, older versions, that will not trigger an update to happen. So although that might seem a benefit, it also can pose risks to the database because you're running a really old version against a really new server version. Any connections to the database should really happen, or should happen, I shouldn't say really, should happen through the realms of the admin. It should happen through the realms of the API. At no point should we have any connections direct to that mFiles database, whether it's the Firebird database, or it's the SQL database. It actually will void any vendor support for the solution. So if you do need to carry forward tasks to write data to the database, again, there's avenues within the tool and the API, and even through the Vault application framework or the modules that I was explaining, that will allow us to do that work in a supported manner. Utilizing a testing vault for changes. Very important, as a lot of the tasks like I'm talking to you about today, and maybe even design-wise, is happening internally internally handled. We want to make sure that you're comfortable with the actions that you're putting forward, that you're asking of the server. The design is solidified. So making sure that you're testing those concepts, not in your production vault, but rather a simple Firebird vault where you can just sandbox the concepts before you introduce it to the broader public. Again, you can have as many vaults as you would want. And so to put the risk into production where it's a lot harder to undo tasks, it's a better mechanism to leverage a testing vault to just make sure what you are expecting to see is exactly what users are seeing. Maintaining backups. I always cringe when I get involved in tickets where you go out to the server and you've realized that backups have not run on M files for weeks or months or even beyond that. This to me would be a daily task, if not daily, at least weekly, to ensure that your backups are running. There's no errors, coming back to that Windows event log concept. And then carry out your disaster recovery plan. If something unfortunately would happen, are we sure that the data will be able to be restored? Practicing that. M-Files has 30-day trial licenses to be able to, if you have a testing environment, just to spin it up and see if you have current data in there and you could recover from a disaster. Storing them in a different location. That's not new by any means, but is important to mention that you don't want everything just writing to the server that eventually could be compromised in some sort of way. Know that if you have customized web modifications for M-Files, notifications, those are going to be manually backed up. Registry settings, they're becoming a little bit few and far between. M-Files is working those into the administrator tool. There might be a handful that's still handled through a Windows registry update. But again, take note that those concepts are things that would not be encapsulated in a standard backup, either through the M-Files tool or through SQL. Updating M-Files. Referred to this a little bit before, but monthly updates are pushed out. They're pushed out typically the third week of the month, with the exception of July. July is the only month we do not see an update. You still have an option to manually update. Some user permissions do not allow updates to push across, or like I had indicated prior, if users are on such an old version that will not ever trigger an update, that would be a scenario where you would want to go manually grab the most recent update and install that. The update process on a workstation is extremely simple. M-Files, you click on the executable, it will recognize all of the vaults the user has access to. It will replace the old version, and they're off running within 5-10 minutes. So pretty simple process. Just know if you are one that is running an old version, there is a reason that you are not getting those updates. Basic troubleshooting. This is true for server level, but it's also pretty true for client or users. So Windows event logs are a great place to start. Do we see anything that is clearly evident that might be causing the problem that's being reported? Making sure that the servers are rebooting. We want to make sure the uptimes are not running beyond 90 days for sure. There are recommendations on the IT front that I can't provide here today, but making sure that those reboots are happening. Making sure Windows updates are happening. Windows updates I have seen actually prevent M-Files from updating. So .NET Framework and beyond are things that Windows updates do account for. And a lot of times we see that actually interfere with the ability for M-Files to do what it needs to do. So working the ground up making sure that the system can perform, even though it usually is reported with it being an mFiles issue, because that is where our users are playing within. As we start peeling things back, a lot of these things surface as far as things that are, not necessarily being overlooked, but are not being addressed. Therefore, just kind of being a snowball effect as we are looking to optimize mFiles usage performance. Moving into protecting your data. Again, for those that were joining us maybe beyond the agenda introduction, you may have been included about a month and a half ago on communication regarding protecting the file data, protecting it at rest. We have that option within mFiles. There are considerations. So the task itself is pretty simple and straightforward. The cleanup is pretty simple and straightforward. But as highlighted here on the slide, in order to encrypt file data for a vault that's already in use, it actually will require double the storage space temporarily until the cleanup, aka optimization, is run. So as we plan, happy to work with you, because again, we don't want to get into the other scenario where you're running out of space, but we have to leverage some kind of strategy to be able to increase that space so that file data can be encrypted, and then the unencrypted document will be purged from the system through the optimization task. There's various reasons to encrypt that data. I won't get into those details here today, but again, putting this out as another invite for anybody who might be interested in encryption, please reach out to us. We will help you through the planning processes. We can even help you through the encryption task. But it is something that is definitely front and center, and we want to make sure that you're comfortable with the type of protection that you have on your data. As Kurt mentioned in the kickoff, this recording will be archived out into our website. This technical resource and the hyperlinks contained within will also be available to you. But not only are we a resource, there's various resources here that can be leveraged for anybody on staff that really wants to stay current with as much as they can, from the mFiles community to our e-learning portal, which has not only the webinars, but our quick trip training sessions, basic troubleshooting guide. It carries forward through common errors, common reported issues. We are working towards an actual searchable knowledge base. That more to come in 2023 here, but really allowing you guys to be in the driver's seat, to as comfortable as you are. And then obviously we are here as well. The link to the protecting the file data and the communication that was sent will also be present within there. So I'm going to pause there, and then I'm going to actually wrap it up with jumping over to the administrator tool, but I'll pause for any other questions.
No questions, Tracy. You must be covering everything.
All right. So the first thing I wanted to illustrate as we wrap up is really the ability to run these tasks. And remember, the whole message around when you do actions within or to the database, you want to be doing that through the realms of mFiles. When we say that, it is really through the mFiles administrator tool. I'm just going to use this as an example. I have a couple of vaults here, but the maintenance is really conveniently wrapped into a right-click menu. When I right-click on the vault, you can see the maintenance tasks as one of the options to be selected here. We have the quick, the thorough, and then the rebuild of index, along with the verify, repair, and thorough. All of the documentation that mFiles has, I think the guide's probably about 30 pages in length. it goes into a lot of the detail. Even though the task is quick, they provide you with a lot of guidance in order to carry through the task. We see reference to encryption here as well. The thorough optimization, like I mentioned, out of the box, that will be configured. So as we look at the scheduled jobs, you will see that I have those 4 databases. This recent vault is new, so it hasn't run yet, but it is running on Friday or Saturdays. And again, this is one area to ensure that you're not seeing any errors or unsuccessful runs as you are doing your maintenance checks for those week and monthly tasks. So simple right click to be able to get to a lot of the options available as described. And then the other item I wanted to show is just from the lens of encryption. So when file data is sitting outside of the database, in this example, I can navigate out to that file data directory. And like I'd shared with SQL, that typically is sitting on the mFiles application server. But nonetheless, you can navigate now with an encrypted vault, going to the file data, and you can see the flavor of it being encrypted. So there is no opportunity for anybody to interpret this document because of that level of encryption. Again, I think a really good thing given the situation and in the world that we live in. If you are interested in walking or helping us walk you through the steps of it and just analyzing what it would mean in your environment. Again, I understand some people are visual, so I wanted to show kind of a representation of what that looks like from a file level. Outside of that, I'm going to leave up the last slide here. If you snap a picture of the QR, that will bring us to, or bring you to the resources that are plentiful for you to really tap into anything and everything and engage with our team as you need. So with that, Kurt, I'm going to roll things back to you, ask if there's any other questions, and for the one lucky winner of the Amazon gift card.
Looks like we do not have any questions. We did get a comment from one of our attendees. Thanks. Good reminder on all the maintenance. And so appreciate that comment. We'll go ahead and draw. I know we're over time here. I apologize for that, everybody, but let me draw here quick for the name of the gift card. And the winner today is Mike L. Congratulations, Mike. I will be sending you an electronic $25 Amazon gift card. So be on the lookout probably early next week in your inbox for that. So appreciate everybody's time today and attendance. And like always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. Have a great weekend.